Gilbert knows the blueprint, and he says, you know, I can't work with children anymore, he said, because it's too tiring for me, and they don't listen to me, and they don't have respect. No one teaches them how to be respectful, and so they're just all over the place, and they can't really focus. So it's a waste of my time to go work with children. So we said, well, would you be willing to work with the children at the program that we started? You know, they're all young children, different ages, 12 to about 16. And he said, oh, no, I don't really want to do that. So we worked on him for a little while. And we told his wife, these children are different. You know, they're learning to be quiet in the forest. Their eyes are big. Their ears are big. You know, they're actually respectful. They know Gilbert's story. They're really interested in hearing his stories directly, and they want to hang out with him. So eventually he reluctantly said, I'll come up for 45 minutes, I'll tell a story, I'll sing a song, and then I'm going to leave. And that was about 10 in the morning. He shows up, and about 2:45 in the afternoon, we're getting close to the time when we have to get the parents, the young people out to the parking lot and meet their parents. And he declares kind of pretty intensely to everybody in the room, including the young people, these young people here, they were chosen by Wakantanka to lead the people, he said, right? And Chris Liberty and I look at each other like, well, what fires are we going to be putting out with parents tonight? You know, like when this gets home. Then he says, like Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, they have these attributes of great leadership, sacred leaders, he said. And all I'm thinking about is the origin stories of how all these children got into this program. You know, one guy actually stole money from a drug dealer and then got shot at, and the bullet hole is still next to his mother's house front door. And she called us up and said, can my son come way out in the woods and be safe with you guys? Because I know these guys, urban drug dealers, are afraid to go in the forest, and so this is the only place where he'll be safe. And it could save his life. That was the request. And I brought that to the other children at the fire, and I said, do you think this is okay? Because he could come in here and crash your party, you know, like, do you guys want him? And they said, well, let's get this right. You know, you're basically saying that if we say yes, he'll live, and if we say no, he could die. So what do you think we're going to say? You know, it was their answer to me. I was like, that's a good point. And they said, besides, if he doesn't want to participate, he can just sit here. We don't care, you know. So he did. He just sat there. And sat there with his headphones blaring really loud, and you could hear his loud music, you know, for a long time. But then the music got quieter and quieter over the next few days. Then you couldn't hear music. Then he just had his headphones on, but he was listening in on everything that was happening. And then instead of sitting sideways with his arms crossed, his arms were down, and he was sitting with his feet towards the fire, and then the headphones were next to him, and then there was no headphones. And then that took, you know, a few weeks. But, you know, 2 years later, you could not tell him from the other children, right, in terms of the attributes that were shining from him. And that was a cultural mentoring model we were operating with. And it was a homeschool program, so it was only 3 days a week. And I can tell you other stories of other children who were put in that program who definitely did not have these attributes when they came. So, you know, it begged the question, first of all, what are the attributes? You know, I said to Chris Liberty, I'll go talk to Gilbert. You go talk to the kids on their way to the parking lot and tell them to just not mention this tonight, and give us a couple days to think about this, to see what people are going to be thinking, you know. Because some people really didn't send their children to us to become Crazy Horse, to be honest. You know, that wasn't part of the plan. But Gilbert was so stunned by these young people and the power that they showed. And I went and sat with him at his little place, his cabin, and I was sitting with him. I'm saying, Uncle, what did you see? He said, you know, John, he said, my great-grandfather, Woptuka, a powerful holy man, his son, Moose Camp, my grandfather, he told me about these attributes. He said, well, cultural elders in our community must know these attributes and look for them in the young people and in the parents and in the elderly generations. And he said they should be there all throughout. He said if they're there, culture is working. He said if they're not there, then you have to take care of that and figure out why. So it was our responsibility. But he said, in all my life, he said, I believe my grandfather's ways. I never do anything different than this. He said, I carry my chanupa my whole life in this manner. He said, but never touching alcohol, never doing any kind of drugs or getting mixed up with the white man's religion. I keep true to my ancestors' ways. He said, my whole life. He said, but everywhere I go on reservations, he says, among non-Indian people, he says, I'm working all over with different kind of people, Latino people in the fields when I'm working with my father, working in the agricultural field. I never see children with these attributes since I'm a boy, he said. These are the first children in my whole life as an adult person that I see that have these attributes. That's what he said. And I just really was shocked by that. He knows what they are. And it was a shock to him to see a consistent group of children between 12 and 16 who all had those attributes that his great-grandfather talked of. Can you imagine that? And he woke up to that and he told me, I said, well, what are these attributes? Please, I want to know what you're seeing. And he said, well, he said, happiness of a child. You know, children when they're young and so happy, their eyes have a look. And he said, you always get happy when you look at them. And they make you happy when you see them happy. You hear them giggling and laughing and playing with their friends, and your heart is made bigger from this. He said, you can feel that so sacred that these children are like this, he said. But you see, as they grow older in modern society, that happiness dwindles and their eyes get colored over like a skin goes over their eyes, he said. All right, you know that one? Happiness of a child. He said, you know, the second attribute is like vitality, like a quickness of a coyote. You know, you ever come up on a coyote and he doesn't know you're there. He said, 1 second, he's standing there minding his own business. Maybe he's sniffing around for a little grass vole or something in the grass there, he said, and he doesn't know you're right there. He said, but he turns and looks at you, and your mind cannot even hold how fast it is. 1 second later, he's 100 yards away. How's that happen? He said, that animal has electricity in his body. He said, that's one of the attributes. When a person has so much electricity, their body is vital. They have more energy in their body than they know what to do with. He said, so they dance and they laugh. And he said, they're always full of mischief and ready to have fun. He said, these are people with vitality. And then the third one is the one where they are empathetic. They know the creation, he said, the little animals. They look at a worm on the ground. He says, I know that animal has a right to live just like me. You know, Great Spirit placed me here, but also placed that worm. I'm not above him. You know, and my heart knows this. He said, so if I see him crossing the sidewalk, I'm going to take him and move him so he doesn't get stepped on. Why? Because I care about him. He has a right to live like I do. I feel in my own self his connection with me. And that's so for true with the plants. He said, you know, all things, all little animals, all the rivers and the grasses. He said, even if I have to pull a root from the ground, I feel it in my own heart. I'm taking a life. That's empathy, connection, he said. So that was the third one. The fourth one, he said, is that because they're hunter-gatherer, nomadic people, and because they are, you know, decentralized, there's no kind of leadership, there's no like, you know, hierarchy, authority kind of a thing. There isn't a management structure. He said, my people are too practical for that. He said, because I have to go this way, my cousin is going this way, you know, his sister has to go this way. He said, we are all doing different things on the land, but we're going to come back together later. I don't have a chore list, nobody's telling me what to do, but I already know. I take initiative because I understand we're going to have a fire here tonight, so I know that. I'm going to gather firewood on my way. You know, this is how my grandfather raised me to be. He said, because we're hunter-gatherer, nomadic people, we're practical. We do not have time to have chore lists, and I do something because someone tells me. This is what we call truly helpful, he said. And he said, you know, John, all my people were like this when I'm growing up. He said, so when my grandma comes to my house, I hear her car a long way away because of her muffler. Is in such a way that we know grandma's car by her sound, he says, right? And he says, you know, she's coming so far away, so quiet out there on the prairie, you can hear her coming for a long way. So we're thinking, how are we going to psych out grandma? Because she's going to pull in there. We know she's going to have packages in the back of her car. If you open the door and say, Grandma, can I help you? What's she going to say? No, I got it. Because she's truly helpful also. She doesn't want anybody to help her. So what I have to do is walk out the door as she's pulling in, time it just right, walk to her front door, open her door for her, open her back door, grab her packages, close that door, and walk towards the house swiftly and say over my shoulder, Grandma, where you want them? So you have to psych her out. So he says there's like deeper psychology to what it means to be truly helpful. But really, he said, a man's vision, a woman's vision in this world is like truly helpful. How do I help my people? Right? So that's that one. And then, of course, a lot of parents have said if I can guarantee that in their children, they would double what we're asking for tuition. One father actually calculated for me how much it actually costs him in pain and mental trauma and time lost in having to get into arguments with his teenagers to try to get them to be helpful at all. And he reckoned that when he calculated it out, it would be really a bargain at the tuition we were charging for that program. And we should really ask twice as much if we can guarantee truly helpful. The next one was awe, kind of the spirit of like awe that I'm still alive. You know, like people who have had a near-death experience, you know, come back from that, they tend to really, really value each moment with this deep preciousness. And people who have been exposed to death because they've lost relatives or loved ones, or they've lost pets and it's been well processed, and that's key. If there's support and it's well processed, people will grow with this realization of our own mortality, which isn't depressing. It's actually something that can activate a deep sense of awe for what it means to be alive at all. Right? And so he would say that someone who has that attribute shows up fully. They put themselves wholeheartedly into whatever they're doing. You know, if they're going to dance, they're going to get really down there and dance, and they're going to do their best moves. If they're going to sing from their heart with all their power. If they're going to tell a story, they're going to hold forth. You know, but whatever they take on with all that they've got. And of course, these are leader qualities. And the next one, he said, was compassion. He said, you know, if you think about Dalai Lama or Jesus Christ, he said, all of them say this. He said, but it's true. He said, when the Creator made us, he gave us one instruction: to love one another and to care for one another. You know, and he said that the people who have a forgiving heart, who hold love in their heart, and who love even their enemies, you know, and have that heart for kindness for others, he said this is the highest attribute really a person can achieve almost, you know, like that was the one that was most important. And the seventh attribute he described was the quiet mind. And he came to say that the quiet mind was both, you know, kind of like the outcome of all of this, but also the one that led to all the others. And he said it is not on the same equal footing as the other attributes. And he explained to us that it was like a keystone attribute. And if you could get people to the quiet mind fast, the other 6 attributes would come much more quickly. And when he explained these attributes to us, we realized that all the children that we had been working with 2 and 3 years at this time really actually did have those attributes. I mean, he was actually accurately describing what those children had. But, you know, we didn't know that we were doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was not our assessment tool. We were not aiming for that. But in the last, 10 years, we flipped it around and realized, well, wait a minute. That is what cultural mentoring does. That is our focal point. This is the outcome we're looking for. And so therefore, we started to look at everything that we were doing in terms of the attributes. What activities, what cultural elements are we using that cause which attribute? And we mapped that out. And when we mapped that out, we began to understand that we could get there faster. And so we've actually increased the efficiency and power of what we're doing. But I'm telling you right now that the cultural mentoring model we're using really, really needs adult support. Like, I'm telling you that. It's not like I can take a child in isolation and get them to those attributes, because if I do, I'm going to mentor them right out of the cultural understanding of their own peer group. And that's not good for them. You know, in the end, they may end up with the attributes, and they might be strong-hearted people in the long run, but why cause suffering if we could actually just bring a bunch of children and families along and get all ages and stages of life to get their experience of that connection back into their own body and awaken that blueprint, you know? And I go to the sun every year and I hang out with these Naro Bushmen because, to me, I sometimes forget that human beings can have these attributes, you know? And it's almost like theoretical. I go down to the Kalahari, I see children at 3 with those attributes, I see children at 9, I see preteens, I see teenagers, I see young adults, I see young mothers, I see young fathers, I see aunties and uncles, I see older parents, I see grandparents, and I see women in their 90s. And all of them have the attributes, the entire journey of life. And when I see that, I know that all of us could have that. And I also know that how you get those attributes is not how you learn to play the piano, and it's not how you learn math or reading and writing. And the Western model of education is so locked into our brains, we don't know that there's another delivery system that's delivering a different outcome. You know? And what I'm talking about is not anti-education, it surrounds it. You know? And when you think about it, we really try hard not to use the word school in the work that we do, because if the moment I say school, then you're going to have an expectation of me. The moment I call myself a teacher or you a student, you're going to have an immediate expectation. And I'm not going to meet that expectation because I'm not looking there at all. I am not focusing on that one bit. Because why should I when everybody else already is? You know, it's already everywhere. It's super pervasive. We live in the age of information. We have more information than we know what to do with. We're not short on a lack of opportunity for skills and information, are we? Do you think that's where our deficit is? Got on the internet lately? You subscribe to an Amazon newsletter? How many new books come out every day? Do we need more information? Maybe we do. But we're not hurting for information. It's a multi-trillion-dollar international industry, so I am not worried about information and skills transfer. It's covered. That's a different delivery system. That's what schools do, okay? But what I'm talking about is not there at all. There's 4 quadrants in the work that I do, and there's nice 4 carpets right here. So I'll stand over here in the educational quadrant and mess up your lighting for a second. This is the educational quadrant, but really when you look at the relationship that people have with nature, they have to learn skills and information about nature. So the Bushmen do that. They work with their children, they give them skills and information about nature, just like we learn skills and information to make it in our world today, okay? So we're honoring that, but we're not working on it at H. Shields because it's already covered. If you go over to this square, you have another multi-trillion-dollar industry that doesn't need our help, and that's the outdoor recreation industry. And it's everything from dog walking to playing soccer under the lights in Seattle in the rain at night, to kayaking, skiing, right? Extreme outdoor sports, swimming, whatever. But anything that you can do outside, that basically what drives people to do this quadrant is that it feels better after they're done. The reason people surf is because it feels good. They love it, it feels good. The reason they garden is because they like the feeling they get from it. The reason they like their dog, to walk their dog outside, is because after walking their dog, they feel good. You know? One woman said to me, I'm so thankful for my dog, because if it wasn't for my dog dragging me around outside, I would forget how good it feels to be outside, because I'd never go outside. Right? So she's thankful for her dog for being her recreational outdoor coach. So that's this quadrant, right? This one doesn't need much help either. But we also incorporate playing outside in the work that we do. So we do skills and information, and we do this. And over here is the whole realm that Richard Louv talks about, and this is the realm of connection. And he says, you know, back before media got really powerful, and back before computer games, and back before you know, 24-hour news stations broadcasting terrifying news about someone who was abducted in Oklahoma. You know, so like 1 in 320 million people, there's one person abducted in Oklahoma, but it shows up in every living room, maybe in every bedroom, in every kitchen nowadays, 3, 4 TVs going in a house, 24-hour news going in. So parents now have a deep psychological fear to let their children wander outside. So one of the biggest barriers to connecting to nature now is fear. And it's actually, the criminology statistics are proving that it's actually safer now than it was back in the 70s when I was wandering around outside, but no one looked after me. I was kicked out in the morning. I was in the program that the Department of Nature Connection set up under the presidency at the time, Minister of Nature Connection. And he told all the moms and dads, all of you say around the same time in the morning, get out from under my feet, you drive me crazy, go outside, I'll call you when dinner's ready. And the doors open, then the door closed, and we were all thrown outside. But you could hear other doors closing around the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden there was like a whole pack of kids with no supervision. We all found each other, and we went down into the creek where our parents couldn't see us, and we made sure we played outside the whole day. And then there was whistles for this family, there was a bell for that family, so we all had different signals to call us in at dark for food, right? And during that time, we were completely unsupervised. We never really got hurt. Occasionally got stung by yellow jackets, you know. because you can't resist throwing apples at yellow jacket nests. At some point, you're going to get stung. You know, there wasn't really too much bullying going on either. And if there was bullying, you could just run away. And you did, because you realized no one was going to help you. So you were really on your own. So you just did what you had to do. And we were pretty reasonably organized. I mean, we played chaotically, but it was pretty extraordinary how well everyone took care of each other, you know. And there's all these studies now that basically say children just do that, you know. They're designed to do that. It's part of their original programming. And if you just let them do it, they actually do it really well. And that's why, and they instinctively know that parents will, you know, put a hurting on their fun. And so they go where parents won't go. And do you remember that feeling, if you were one of those kids growing up like this, when a parent actually entered that scene, how gross it felt? Anybody remember that? It just felt awful. You got like this feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's like, oh, there's these big long legs that are entering into our world, you know, and they're totally on the wrong program. You can just feel it. They are so out of touch, you know, like the feeling, right? And I can tell you right now that you can't bring that back. Like, it's almost impossible to bring that back unless you have parents cooperating. You know, and there are parent co-ops now that actually do that. They actually go out to parks, and they hang out, and they drink wine at the table, and they just let their kids just run off. And it's really hard for parents to do that now. You actually have to coach parents to actually help them understand that you don't have to helicopter over them like, you know, one of those drones that flies over with the camera, and do everything, reach in front of them and reach around them and make sure that everything's happening and that you're controlling all the inputs and outputs and all that, you know. They actually can function quite well on their own. And they climb trees, and they take risks, and they jump off things that you don't want to know they're jumping off of, and they're doing all these crazy things. And that's why you don't want to be there anyway, right? And they're playing, and they're laughing really hard, and they're getting color in their cheeks, and they're actually, there's all these studies that basically say children who are left to their own devices in nature develop a higher level of creativity, problem-solving skills, and more dynamic modeling capability in their brains, right? Not to mention they're healthier, they're happier. You know, so some of those 7 attributes that I mentioned kick in just if you leave them alone in nature. Don't do anything, okay? But as I said, that's not happening anymore. And it's almost impossible to imagine us going back to the time when we just let our kids run out. Well, maybe I'm talking to Topanga Canyon, so maybe it is happening. But over here is this quadrant. And this is where H. Shield's work comes in, because this is the quadrant of cultural mentoring. And this is the role that those elderlies play who see and understand how to map and strengthen all 4 quadrants using various devices for leveraging certain things that you want to have happen. Again, children will connect to nature to a point, but let's say the peer group, if you could have like a 100% quotient of nature connection possibility where all 7 attributes are totally shining, people wandering around in the woods on their own won't get there, because there's elements missing from that experience. If you look at what the Bushmen are doing, they have a very sophisticated model that you can't see working because it's got so many layers and everybody knows their role. There's roles for young girls, there's roles for young boys, there's roles for teenage girls, teenage boys, there's roles for young parents, you know, men and women. There's roles for aunties, there's roles for uncles, there's roles for grandmothers and grandfathers. All of these are rites of passage. All of them have training involved, and everyone is taking responsibility. And so you can't tell who's doing what because everybody's carrying the village. But what they do is they create this giant container of safety and connection for their children. And the elements of all those pieces sort of masterfully conducted like an orchestra, right? Builds connection for all ages and stages of life. So you don't have that peer issue that I was talking about earlier because everyone's going on a deep connection journey, right? The cultural mentoring model, you know, as represented by what we call the art of mentoring, is essentially a simulated village. And we basically take all these, let's call them Legos, you know, each little element of cultural mentoring that stimulates skills and information, that stimulates recreation, that stimulates connection, and goes beyond that to deep connection. There's Legos, you know, and let's say we have 512 Lego categories that we work with. But if you show up in art of mentoring, you come to the registration table, we reach in the box, grab a Lego, and we say, would you like to be responsible for some little part of the village this week? Oh, yeah, of course. Cool. Here's your Lego, right? Instructions inside. And we hand out you know, 250 of those Legos as people register, and pretty soon there's 250 culture mentors at the Art of Mentoring, and all of them are wondering, why is this experience so powerful? Who's doing this? They're really doing that. They're like, I've never felt anything more transformative. You know, I've had people who are like transformative leadership, you know, teachers and facilitators, and they come into the Art of Mentoring and they're like, this is the most dynamic, transformative model I've ever been in. Who's leading this? Where is it happening? You know, he's holding a Lego in his hand while he's asking me, right? Right? Because our body is designed to respond to a village. It's designed to respond to a village that has order in the stages of life. And specialty roles, you know, herbalists, hunters, whatever, you know. And Art of Mentoring, we just cut the whole thing up into stages of life and specialty roles. And we just hand them out randomly as people come in. Say, hey, would you be willing to just play with this little thing? Sure. What do I have to do? Well, when you go to your first clan meeting, they'll tell you what to do with that. And then that's that. That's as much as we do. We train the clan leaders, so if there's 250 people in Art of Mentoring, there's always 75 people working behind the scenes to help facilitate what's going on. But they're not doing it either. They're just training the people, each individual, to carry their Lego powerfully. And then when you come into that experience, you suddenly feel what the Bushmen are living in. But everyone looks normal. They're wearing normal modern clothes. They're talking on their iPhones on breaks. You know, they're playing music. They're hanging out. They're playing volleyball. They're enjoying time in the kitchen. They're playing with their children. They're learning about nature. Or they're doing whatever. You know, sitting by a fire. Everybody's normal, but everyone goes to another level of vibration because those attributes all get turned on. And they go home at the end of the week completely unsatisfied with their situation they have to go back to. Because all of a sudden their whole body is feeling that they're mapping back into a two-dimensional experience and that they're leaving a five-dimensional one. And their children are super pissed that the week is over, and they're yelling at the parents, which we tell parents, I'm telling you now, if you bring your children, at the end of the week they're going to be mad at you because they don't want it to end. I constantly hear these children saying to parents, it's like the average statement is, you finally figured it out, Mom, and now you're going to make it end? I've been waiting my whole life for you to get it. And now we've had it this week, and you're going to take me out of here? You know, and we have to tell the children, you guys, the camp is over. Like, we don't own this place. We're renting it, and it's over. We all have to leave. There is no camp. It's gone tomorrow. Please, go home, you know. But we leave everyone with the sense that there's a whole other dimensionality to us as humans, and it has to do with the village, and it has to do with the loss of the village, and it has to do with understanding that you can very intentionally tweak, facilitate quality of life through very intentional village activities. And there's components of that everywhere. You know, there's good things like, you know, there's the red tent thing, the movement that's happening for young women, and then there's the, you know, the Mankind Project is happening. And, you know, so you're seeing village elements showing up, but they're showing up as isolated islands, and they're not coordinated into the expression of a cohesive village spirit, right? And all that the Art of Mentoring is doing is it's essentially giving a map to how to conduct the orchestra called village. And people end up as stakeholders within that village, and then they ask, can you bring it to my zip code? And then we bring in the International Art of Mentoring Leadership Team, which is working, again, in all those countries I said to you earlier. But when you go from Art of Mentoring to community around the world, you keep bumping into children with those attributes. And you recognize them when you see them, you know, and you know that the future is safe in their hands. You know that. You just feel it in your bones. You're just like, it's going to be okay. You know, look at these children. Look at the lights are on. They're home. They're alive. They're powerful. They're energized. And all the attributes of genius map perfectly onto the attributes of deep nature connection. And we didn't set out in our model to discover how to create genius. All I was trying to do was simulate indigenous layered culture to see if it enhanced tracking skills. That's what I was studying in anthropology. And when we started applying it, we started to have these outcomes. So today there's, you know, there's these 8 Shields communities all around California operating in different ages of people, adults and young children. And there's a great spirit of cooperation and interchange between these various disciplines. And, you know, the primitive skills movement in California, the Buckeye Gathering, has really embraced the 8 Shields model, and they're working with it now. And that's been really fun to see and experience. So, you know, I guess the bottom line is that here we are in Topanga Canyon, and, you know, we're not starting from scratch because of who you are in this room. but we're kind of jump-starting a model, and to help, and the Institute is my focus, to really help the adult community to understand this unique thing that Paul is doing, because I really believe that, you know, the Manzanita School is going to set a new standard, because it's going to bring these really powerful cultural mentoring technologies that activate all the electricity in the body, in a sense. Nobody suffers when they have those attributes. It gives them an edge in everything that they pursue, right? Unless they're executioners, then they probably don't want to feel empathy. Nobody's an executioner, right? Didn't offend anybody. Okay. You know, so I think that what we're looking at is like we're returning to something that is our birthright. You know, I guess that's one way to look at it. It's like, you know, if you're thirsty, you need to drink water. So doesn't it seem like birthright to be able to have water? Yeah. And if you're hungry, you should have food. And I think, you know, it's our birthright that we should have good, healthy food systems. And in a way, deep nature connection is like getting water when you're thirsty. And when you understand that it's not a philosophy and it's not an ideology, but it's an actual neurological phenomenon that's actually nourishing you, it's going to be discovered and it's going to be talked about as a very important health leverage point, right? And then all of a sudden everybody's going to want this. But you can't get to it the way we get to school. We can't get to it the way we recreate, and we can't get to it the way we connect on our own. It requires a delivery system called cultural mentoring, period. You know, so, you know, you don't practice an educational model and expect deep nature connection outcomes. Does that make sense? Yeah. But that's hard to get across, even though I say this, and I'll repeat it like a broken record, and there's a reason I'm doing that. Because you can make sense of it, but your body memory might cause you to go right back into your experience in education, and that you might immediately start applying that. The moment you step into an art of mentoring team, you might default directly back to your training, because that's what your body remembers. Right? So we have to kind of retrain and open up new possibilities. So if you're interested in that experience, go to the art of mentoring, because you're going to suddenly be in what we call a transformative human reactor based on cultural mentoring, where the energy is so strong that you can't possibly pull it off course. And then your body wakes up. It's like getting a jump start, you know, jumper cables put on you and reactivating your cultural mentoring memory. Like, oh, wow, yeah, I can do this. And by the way, it's really fun. Just so you know, art of mentoring is hilarious. It's really fun. People have a blast. Because every single person is leading, every person is teaching, every person is facilitating, and every person is wondering where the power is coming from, you know? So it gets to be really amazing. And there's one in Santa Cruz, I think July 9, is that right? 7th to the 12th? 13th, okay. July 7th to 13th. So, you know, carpool up, come up en masse. The more of you come as friends in groups, the better. It's better to come in a clump than isolate it. Because if you have a transformative experience alone and you try to go back and tell your friends about it, you'll get this. You ever experienced that? So just drag everybody. And that works real well. So yeah, that's about, I think, what I want to share. But you know, just know that we're behind the scenes here at Manzanita, and we're really, really excited about what you're doing, and we're really jealous. We really want one of these in Santa Cruz, really bad, because that's where I live. And we're working on one in Santa Cruz, but you know, this is just an extraordinary opportunity that's going on here with the Cali Camp facility, and gosh, the location of it. I mean, even just to stand there and see those rocks sticking up, you know, this is going to be a lucky bunch of young people who have that experience. But I want you to know also that any of you larger kids, older kids in the room, that if you get to be involved, it's going to bring good things to you as well. You know, you heard what Paul said. It's, yes, you could use help setting up art projects and grading papers and doing parking lot stuff, but really, I hope you heard what I'm saying. You know, you all have a role to play. I mean, a real one, authentic role, and in revitalizing something. And I hope that you get involved, and I hope to come down and see you more often, and or more regularly. And I think I can be convinced.